In this lecture, we'll learn about the carousel component. The carousel component is used as a slideshow for various kinds of content, and it comes with controls, indicators, and captions, and different options for behavior. We start with creating a basic carousel with slides only, and the slides will be images. We make a container div with the unique ID carousel, the classes carousel and slide, and the data write attribute with the value carousel. Inside this, we have another container div with the class carousel inner. And the role attribute list box. Now we're ready to create our slides. The content for our slides goes into a div with the class carousel item. So in this case, we'll create an image tag with the source being an image from placeholder with the dimensions 600 times 300 pixels. The alt attribute will get the text first slide, and we'll also add the classes dblock and img fluid to make the images responsive in the browser. This is not a feature built into the carousel component. Now we'll duplicate this 2 times and change the alt text accordingly. Finally, we'll add the active class to our first carousel item to make this specific slide appear as the first one. In fact, it's required to use the active class on one of the slides to make the carousel appear at all. Now let's see this in action in the browser. We see that the carousel will now cycle through all of the slides automatically with a default interval of 5 seconds. We can add controls to our carousel so the user can navigate between the individual slides. To create a control button for the previous slide, we first make an anchor tag with the href attribute pointing to the ID of our carousel, which in our case is carousel. It will get the class carousel control prev, the role attribute with the value button, and the data slide attribute with the value prev. As the content for our anchor tag, we will create an icon by making an empty span tag with the class carousel control prev icon. And the area hidden attribute with the value true. For accessibility, we'll also create another span element right after with the class sr_only and the text previous. We'll now duplicate the code for the control button and adjust the class names, attribute values, and text content to make it work as a control for the next slide. Let's see this in the browser. The next thing we want to add is indicators. Indicators show the position of the current slide in relation to the rest of the slides, while also acting as navigation. Indicators are structured as an ordered list with the list items referencing the carousel and the individual slides via data attributes. We create an ordered list with the class Carousel Indicators. Inside this, we create a list item with a data target attribute with the value carousel and a data slide to attribute with the value 0. 0 will reference the first of the slides. We duplicate this twice and change the value of the data slide to attribute accordingly. Finally, we add the class active to our first item. Let's have a look in the browser. The last thing we want to add is captions. These are added to each slide as a div container with custom content inside. In the first slide, we'll add a div with the class Carousel Caption after our image tag. Inside this div, we'll first create an H3 heading element with the text caption, and then a paragraph with the text. This text describes the first slide. We'll now copy and paste our caption code block to the remaining 2 slides and change the text content of the paragraphs accordingly. Let's see all these features together in the browser. We can control the behavior of the carousel by adding data attributes to the carousel div. Notice that we've already used the data write attribute with the value carousel to make the carousel autoplay on load. If we change the value to false, which is the default value, it will start after the user manually cycles the first slide. With the data attribute data pause, we can choose whether or not the carousel should pause when the user hovers it. The default is hover, but we'll change that by adding the attribute without the value. This refers to the value null. As we can see in the browser, now the hover state won't pause the carousel. With the data attribute data wrap, we can choose whether or not the carousel should cycle continuously or have hard stops. The default value is true, so we will add the attribute with the value false and have a look in the browser. We can now see that the carousel stops when the last slide is active. With the data attribute data interval, we can set the delay time in milliseconds between slide transitions. We will add the attribute with the value 2000 to make the carousel go faster. Let's see it in the browser. The last data attribute we can use to control the behavior of the carousel is the data keyboard attribute. The default value is true, meaning that the carousel reacts to keyboard events when using the arrow left and right. This can be disabled by using the value false. We have now learned how to create a carousel component with controls, indicators and captions and different options for behavior. Go on and continue with the coding exercises, which will help you learn the correct structure for this component. In the next lecture, we'll learn how to create and use the collapse component.